Welcome back to another Film Geek movie review. In just a bit, I am headed out the door to check out the new film, Gladiator II. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, it tells a continuing story of Rome, basically. There is yet another gladiator who has been wronged by two evil, tyrannical emperors, and this gladiator is on a mission for revenge. You know, kind of like the first one. Alright guys, well this film is directed by Ridley Scott and it's starring Paul Mescal, Connie Nielsen, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. And to be perfectly honest, I'm looking forward to this movie. I really enjoyed the first Gladiator. It was one of my favorite films and still is a really top-notch film in my mind. There was a point in time where I would just quote, "Are you not entertained?" to pretty much anything and everything I could. I would tell some goofy dad joke to my kids and they would roll their eyes at me and I would go, "Are you not entertained?" And then they would just kind of look at me like, "I don't know what you're talking about, old man, because I'm not old enough to watch whatever movie you're quoting." Well, you know what, guys? It is enough of me sitting here yammering on. It is time for me to get out the door because I need to go see Gladiator II. Welcome back, just getting home, and guys, while I did enjoy this movie, there's some things I want to talk about. So let's get this started, shall we? We're going to get things started with negatives, then move into the positives to end the video on the ever so important high note. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is just the whole movie itself, because this film actually feels more like a remake of the first movie than it actually feels like a sequel. A lot of the same beats are hit in this movie like they were in the first film. It flows along the same way. He starts off at the bottom as just a slave who's owned by somebody, and then progresses through the ranks of gladiator, bada bing, bada boom, big old battle, hey, Rome, fights, so on, so forth. It still goes over the same territory that the first film did with slight variations to the story. There are some different aspects to this film. I feel like this movie brought in a little bit more political intrigue. You get to see some more behind the scenes of the gladiators that you didn't really see in the first film. But other than that, there really isn't a lot of differences in these two films, to the point where I'm able to say I don't really necessarily think you need to see the first film in order to enjoy this movie, because they give you all of the plot points of the first film and let you know exactly what happened in the first movie, so you know you don't really need to see it. Now, I do recommend seeing the first film if you've not seen it, just because it's an excellent film. But if you just kind of get talked into seeing this movie, don't worry, you're not going to be unentertained. I could not do that any other way. Sorry. But unfortunately, for those of us who are fans of the first film, I just don't feel that this film had the gravity of the first movie. It just wasn't as good all around. Now, the CGI, that was another problem I had with this film. There was a lot of very bad-looking CGI in this movie. There was an entire fight sequence with baboons, and I'm sorry, guys, if this was a horror movie, I probably would have been like, I liked that creature design, that was pretty good. But that they were supposed to be baboons? They didn't look like baboons. I don't know what in God's green earth they were supposed to be, but they sure as hell did not look like baboons, and they didn't really even move like anything that was natural. That's my big problem with CGI and motion with creatures and all. Now, I completely understand that we do not want to use real animals because they can be harmed, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the use of CGI animals for the safety of the animals, but at least make them look like real animals, because my gosh, this looked more like they were having a fight with some kind of monster and not baboons. There's also some really good cinematography. There's some really great fight sequences, which I will get into, but there's also some really hard to swallow, very unbelievable moments in this film, but they're cool. I think it's in the trailer. I'm pretty sure it's in the trailer. There is a fight in the Colosseum with a gladiator on a rhinoceros, and while that whole sequence is super cool, at the very end of it, you're like, wait a minute. The Romans, like, had a pet rhino? They domesticated a rhino just so a guy could ride it around in the Colosseum and kill people? I don't think they did that. And then there's another scene that might seem very far-fetched, but let me tell you guys, they did this, and it's also in the trailer too. They do a naval battle in the Colosseum, and this is something the Romans did. They would flood the Colosseum and reenact naval battles, and I thought it was super cool that they threw that in there, because I've always found that a really neat little bit of history. But I'm pretty sure there wasn't CGI sharks in the water either. And that really just made the entire scene super goofy for me. There was already plenty of stakes for our characters to be in with just a naval battle inside of a Colosseum. There was plenty of action to be had there. And then you throw in CGI sharks. And unfortunately, the entire time I was watching that scene, all I can think of was Dr. Evil going, "Frickin' sharks with lasers on their heads," through the whole freaking thing, because it seemed like such a ridiculous add-on that it was comical. It almost seemed funny to me that they had sharks. I'm like, okay, so I'm to believe that the Romans domesticated a rhino and held sharks in captivity so they can use them in naval battles in the Colosseum. Okay, Ridley Scott, can I have some of what you're smoking? Because I like the sound of that. But all in all, other those things, I really did enjoy this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It is a little bit more of a popcorn film than the first movie, and I think a lot of that has to do with the silly CGI and just the goofy stuff that they put in there just to make a cool scene. The movie is long also. It is over 2 hours long, and it pushes the 3-hour limit on this film, and I didn't really feel it. The pacing was just fine. There was just some stuff that really didn't need to be there, and they could have shortened the runtime down a lot. There's a lot of little dream sequences that pop up that you really don't need. They just seem like they're there because Ridley Scott wanted a neat looking scene to throw in, and that's about it. They just didn't really serve any purpose. There was already a part of the story that showed you what happened to somebody, and then we're going to have dream sequences about it that just drive it home for you for some reason. And I just felt that that was a bit excessive. Now, they don't go on for long, and it's not like it takes up a significant amount of the film. It's just stuff like that that I feel could have been trimmed down in the movie to get a little bit leaner of a runtime. I think that maybe getting this movie down to just a nice slim 2 hours would have been perfectly fine by me, because there is a lot of cool stuff and some really great fight sequences and all, and I mean, I didn't want any of that cut down by any means, but there was other stuff that just made the film feel a little on the bloated side. So let's get into those positives, shall we? Now let's start with the performances. I think every actor in this film does an outstanding job. Paul Mescal, I'm not really familiar with his work, but he was great as our lead character in this film, although I don't really feel like he was necessarily the main character. Once you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. Denzel Washington delivers a career-defining performance in this film, in my opinion. He was so good. His character is one of the most interesting people that you will see in this entire film. Pedro Pascal is good also, but his character was just, Roman general guy. It wasn't a whole lot there. He was mostly just kind of to drive the narrative, but his acting was just fine. But then there was also our two evil emperors. I really enjoyed these guys, but they aren't really like the emperor in the first movie where he was the driving villain through the entire story. These guys were just bad, inbred weirdos, and that is something I like that the film did do too, was they really made these two look like anemic as hell. Like, it looks like a pinprick is gonna make this guy, both of them, just fall over dead from bleeding to death, because they look that weird and pale and just perfect for the part that they were playing in this movie. A lot of attention to detail was also done in the sets. The sets look outstanding. The cinematography was extremely well done. I mean, the movie really does deliver in the spectacle portion of this film, but again, I still feel that it was a lot more grandiose in the first film because of the needless, really bad CGI in this film, guys. And I mean, wow, unfortunately, it does take you out of the moments, and I know I was in the positives, but that's just how affected I was by this. All in all, folks, I would have to say that this is a very solid film. If you were a fan of the first movie, you are probably going to enjoy this movie. If you're someone who doesn't know anything about the first movie, going into this blind will not be a problem, so that's also good. All in all, I have to say that this is a solid film to get out there and see in theaters, and I just really wonder why they released this film on the same weekend as Wicked, because wow, this is going to be an interesting weekend at the theaters. Alright guys, well that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for checking out the Film Geek. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna, yeah, I did the ponytail